I'd like to be able to sit here and tell you I spent my evening last night watching 1970s East German underground midget porn, but it was actually something far more shameful and embarrassing than that, not to mention far less culturally enriching. So, I managed to slog through all 2 hours, which felt a lot closer to 17 hours, of the fake January 6th committee's fake primetime variety show. Now, let's set aside the fact that this committee is not even a thing, legally speaking, since the makeup of its membership violates the terms of its own enabling resolution, and the fact that there's no ranking member of the opposition, which means the committee is constituted in violation of the standing House rules. Ergo, anything the fake committee does, any fake findings it publishes, any fake subpoenas it issues, are all null and void, irrespective of how willing and eager the FBI is to be Nancy Pelosi's personal goon squad. But I want to set all that aside for a moment and talk about the quality of this thing as a made-for-TV entertainment spectacle. All week long, the Democrats and the news media, but I repeat myself, were trumpeting the fact that a big, fancy ABC television producer was being brought in to slather a bunch of lipstick on this pig. And not just that, but every single broadcast network preempted their 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock hours on the East Coast to show this thing, and every cable news channel except Fox ran it in its entirety. So it was reasonable to surmise, when you consider all of that this thing was going to make for compelling television, at least. It was going to pack some sort of punch. It was going to be a must-watch show right from the first moment. And what did we get in the actual event? Well, first we got Benny Thompson, the fake chairman of the fake committee, droning on for about 13 or 14 minutes, vera slowly, talking mostly about slavery and segregation and the Civil War, which obviously are highly relevant topics when discussing the dust-up at the Capitol on 6 January 2021. Shit, did I just call it a dust-up? Damn it, now I'm going to have the NAACP calling for my firing, and I will never be hired by the Washington Redskins to be their defensive coordinator. Gonna have to put together a whole new life plan now, but oh well, moving on. We need to talk about the teleprompter. Not so much about the fact that it's completely shameful for the members of a congressional committee, allegedly, to be reading from a goddamn teleprompter, but the fact that the prompter screen appeared to be not really anywhere near the camera lens. So we've got Benny Thompson looking like 2 feet off to the right of the camera that he's pretending to speak into. Now, I'm no fancy industry professional, but when you bring in a TV producer to run this thing, isn't effective placement of the teleprompter screen supposed to be one of his main jobs? And when they do the dress rehearsal, because you know they did more than one, probably far more than one, if you're the producer, the guy who's been brought in to make this thing into a riveting entertainment spectacle of the first order, you don't stop Thompson. I mean, you do stop Thompson when he's 5 minutes into this really stultifyingly boring monologue and you say, can we put some more pizzazz in this thing? I can feel people dozing off all across North America. Can't you jazz up this monologue just a little bit? Because this is about as interesting as a guy reading the instruction manual for a hand blender. Specifically, a hand blender that was made in 1864 by plantation slaves. And if 14 minutes of Benny Thompson's NyQuil theater wasn't insufferable and uninteresting enough, we then got 15 minutes of Liz Cheney, the most widely reviled elected official in the entire country, and that is a statistical fact, telling us that the bad orange man is bad and orange and bad and very, very bad and orange. So that was the first half hour of their big 2-hour primetime special. And what else did we hear, aside from Benny Thompson's thoughts on chattel slavery in the antebellum South, and Liz Cheney warning us of the dangers of being bad and orange? Well, we got a bunch of crap that quite literally could have been copy-pasted directly from the transcript of the second fake Trump impeachment. And it helps the effect even more when 2/3 of the Democrats on this fake committee were also participants in the second fake impeachment. The one that was so embarrassing, nobody from the Democrat Party first string wanted to be associated with it. So that's how you wind up with a bumbling doofus like Jamie Raskin heading up the fake impeachment of a president who is no longer the president. So this thing is even more ridiculous than we expected it might be, which is saying a lot. It is unintentional comedy of the most hilarious sort, and nothing will be said in this fake committee that will advance any person's knowledge of anything. So we would do well to ignore the actual contents of it, at least insofar as taking those contents seriously. But there is much to be learned about the fact that this fake committee exists and is holding made-for-TV hearings in prime time. Like what, you ask? Well, last time I checked the scoreboard, the Democrats have been in charge of every organ of the central government for the past 17 months. When one party runs the whole thing for almost a year and a half, normally they have accrued some sort of list of accomplishments, and they want to talk about those because they would like for their party to do well in the midterm election that's coming up, except these Democrats don't have any accomplishments. They have managed to do little else but step on every rake in the hardware store and piss up every tree in the forest. The party that controls everything doesn't want to talk about anything that's happened since they've been in power. Instead, they want to stir up fresh antipathy toward a former president who left office 506 days ago, because they have decided that antipathy toward Donald Trump is the only thing that can possibly animate their voter base. This is not about changing anybody's mind who is a Trump supporter. This is them saying to their own voters, please, please show up and vote for us. Remember how much you hate that bad orange man? Just focus on that. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where you're welcome to come by and stick your pauldron in my cuirass anytime. That's cuirass. It's C-U-I-R-A-S-S. You perverts. Get your minds out of the gutter. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. Happy Friday. I'm your eponymous host and humble servant. And there is something that is so deliciously ironic about seeing Liz Cheney play this role of useful idiot for the Democrats and play it quite enthusiastically. Since I'm old enough to remember back when the anti-war left was a thing that existed, when there were gigantic anti-Iraq war protest marches going on in every big city in the civilized world, the actual president of the United States at the time, George W. Bush, he was not the man whom these crowds held in the greatest contempt. That was Liz Cheney's dad. Dick Cheney was literally Darth Vader for the anti-war left in the early 2000s. If you counted all of the burning effigies and all the hate signs at those protests, Cheney's outnumbered Bush's by at least 10-1. In the mind of the average anti-war protester on the street, George W. Bush was too much of a dumbass to be making these moves on his own. So it's Dick Cheney who's the real puppet master. He's the one standing back in the shadows, pulling W's strings like a little dim-witted marionette. And who knows, maybe they were correct in that assessment, just like they were correct in their assessment of the moral propriety of the Iraq War. But lots of those same people today, they think the Bushes and the Cheneys are all right. They're good people, because they are card-carrying members in good standing of the establishment ruling class. And today's left in the United States isn't animated so much by any coherent form of leftism, but rather by a dogged determination to always be pro-establishment, to always give the ruling class more power, to maintain unflagging ideological conformity to whatever set of dumb ideas the establishment tells them to believe in. And I hear what you're saying right now, Mr. Woke Leftist. You're saying, I'm no conformist, damn you. I've got purple hair and neck tattoos and a javelin through my lip. And I think women have big, huge penises. But maybe one day in the future, son, you will develop enough self-awareness to realize that when you set aside the fashionable, establishment-approved window dressing, you are just as much of a shill for the man as any of those kids back in the 50s who had all matching white t-shirts and blue jeans and crew cuts and watched Leave It to Beaver every Thursday night. You know, the people whom you view as pitiful, benighted conformists from a bygone age. But you might as well be looking in the mirror. For you are merely the same thing in a different decade, in a different costume. You believe what you're told to believe, you think the way you've been programmed to think, and you never question any of it, just like a good, proper little conformist. I think Liz Cheney probably imagines that she's part of some quid pro quo where she's going to reap some reward for her willingness to participate in this Democrat Party political headhunting expedition. She probably at least figures she'll be given a soft landing spot as a contributor for CNN or MSNBC. But she's going to find out she was spectacularly mistaken about all that, because the Democrats, they don't play ball that way. They will pretend to like and respect you as long as you are useful to their current objective. So if you were watching last night, when they cut to the 10-minute recess There's Cheney and Kinzinger. They're both huddling up with Adam Schiff the entire time. Big smiles and back slaps all around. And the two of them, you can tell they're both loving it. It's like Sally Field at the Oscars. They like us. They really like us. We're all friends now. But here's how this is going to go for Liz Cheney, and probably also for Captain Blubberpants, so he should take notes here too. On 16 August, a little more than 2 months from now, there's going to be a primary election in Wyoming in which Liz Cheney is going to be pulverized into tiny little dust particles by Harriet Hageman. And that is the day after which none of the people she thinks are her buddies now, those Democrats, will ever again return her calls or acknowledge her existence after that. She won't have a whole lot to do with her time then. She won't have a general election to campaign for, so she's going to have an unusually long lame duck period. 4 months, in fact. She will get a few guest shots on leftist cable news as long as she's willing to slander Donald Trump, but that won't last very long because her status as an anti-Trump Republican does nothing to save her from the fact that she's not a compelling speaker or a very good interview subject. She's more like a walking advertisement for the wonders of Valium, if anything. So you know what happens at this point. It's getting to be October into November. The TV producers, they're not calling anymore, and crap, in a few weeks, I'm going to have no job and no income. So here is where she announces her run for the GOP presidential nomination in 2024. Not because she actually wants to run, not because she thinks she has any chance of defeating the bad orange bad man, but because it gives her a fabulous excuse to spend the next 1 year calling up every name in Bill Kristol's Rolodex and begging for sweet stacks of campaign cash. I think it's called the Robert Francis O'Rourke Life Trajectory Plan. You don't need to ever win anything, just run doomed campaign after doomed campaign until you run out of offices to run for, and then you can retire fat, rich, and happy despite having never succeeded at anything except kickflips and bong rips, brah. But Liz Cheney's only going to have this one shot, so obviously she needs to make the most of it. I mean, that new hot tub is not going to build itself, am I right? So she'll spend the entire first half of 2024 as an annoying carbuncle on Donald Trump's ankle, calling up Lincoln Project donors, at least the ones who aren't currently incarcerated for being child sex predators, soaking up that sweet TV FaceTime, but then inevitably the primaries will end and Liz Cheney will have received a grand total of 17 votes in the entire country. So she'll drop out of the race in a very classy, dignified way by issuing a statement that says the bad orange bad man is still very bad and very orange. Coup d'etat, insurrection, domestic terror. Also, please give me a job, MSNBC. I'll even take you, CNN. I don't care. I just don't have any idea how to make a living except by slandering Donald Trump. So I'm kind of in a bind here, guys. But you remember how much I helped out with the fake January 6th committee? Hey, come on. One good turn deserves another, right? But much to Liz Cheney's consternation, that phone call is never, ever going to come. And so 3 years from today, Liz Cheney will be hosting some crappy podcast that nobody listens to. And she'll be plugging her brand new memoir because, let's face it, I don't know why this is, but it seems like any mouth-breathing dumb shit who's ever been on television for more than 5 minutes can manage to finagle a 6-figure book advance out of some publisher. But only if at least 85% of the book's contents consist of slandering Donald Trump. And so the book will have some comically ostentatious, self-important title like Truth and Justice, My Principled Struggle Against Bad Orange Hitler, and it'll sell 146 copies, and 120 of those will be charged to Dick Cheney's credit card. Hopefully he doesn't shoot anybody in the face when he finds out about that, but it won't be all bad for Liz Cheney when she falls completely off the face of the earth, because hey, at least she won't have to pretend she lives in Wyoming anymore. She can go be the limousine liberal big city dweller she has always longed to be. So as I said at the end of the opening segment, it speaks really loudly, deafeningly in fact, when the party in power wants to direct your focus away from the period during which they have been the ones in charge of everything. And I'll grant you, it is the pragmatic move. It's really the only political play they have right now, because life has gotten demonstrably, drastically worse for pretty much every American since Joe Biden and the Democrats took over the reins of power in January of last year. And when you've presided over the price of gasoline doubling in less than 18 months, and an explosion in violent crime that your dumbass policies caused, and an explosion in illegal immigration that your dumbass policies caused, and a humiliating defeat at the hands of some 9th century goat herders that your dumbass policies caused, and an invasion of the country's elementary school classrooms by child grooming sex pervert teachers that your dumbass policies caused, well, it only stands to reason that you would want to talk instead about the bad orange insurrectionist. So, okay, let's talk about the thing that you so desperately want to talk about. Specifically, let's talk about the terms that you folks on the left like to use when referring to the events at the Capitol on 6 January 2021, which I will never again refer to as a dust-up to preserve my future employment prospects with the Washington Redskins. And 2 terms in particular, coup d'etat and insurrection. Now, you don't need me to tell you that when some fake news performance artist is talking about January 6th, those 2 terms will figure very heavily in the text that they are pretending not to read from the teleprompter screen. But like all good liars and leftists, but I repeat myself, they use words not because they are appropriate or applicable, but because they sound good. And coup d'etat and insurrection both sound a hell of a lot more impressive than any of the alternatives, like, say, riot or disturbance or fracas or melee or fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Take your pick. But those 2 terms, they mean drastically different things. And yet our fake news performance artists and Democrat office holders, but I repeat myself, routinely use them as synonyms, which they absolutely are not. So the wholesale gang rape of the English language by the American left continues apace. And they're still not even providing the courtesy of a reach around. A coup d'etat is what happens when a person or a group of people forcibly ejects a country's lawful rulers in order to claim power for themselves. More often than not, a coup is perpetrated by military leaders who view the country's current government as corrupt or illegitimate or both, and who command the loyalty of a sufficient portion of the military personnel to make their plan feasible. In the Western Hemisphere, Central and South America, military coups have most often been done by people who wish to retain their current system of government but just want to eject the current leader or leaders. In the Middle East and North Africa, the convention is more along the lines of a military coup being accompanied by an altogether new form of government, most often a military dictatorship, like we saw in Egypt and elsewhere during the Arab Spring in 2011. But here's the thing about coups d'etat. You can't do one when you're the guy already in power. In the literal French translation, coup d'etat means head of state, meaning a guy who is not the current head of state wishes to supplant the guy who is. You can't seize the presidency by force when you are already the president. And while Donald Trump did say a number of dumb, inadvisable things on January 6th and in the days leading up to it, there was never the slightest indication, despite rampant fake news speculation to the contrary, that he ever had any intention of attempting to remain in office if and when the election was certified for Biden. Allegedly. But again, in order for Trump to have done something that could be described as a coup d'etat, he would have to leave office and then attempt to retake it by force after his successor has been sworn in. And then we've got the word insurrection, which is even more inapplicable to the events of 6 January. An insurrection, it's less polite than a coup d'etat. In an insurrection, you are burning the whole thing down. You're seizing the machinery of state, you're trashing the entire system of government, and the previous leaders are likely to wind up with their heads being paraded through town mounted on spikes. Which is to say, a group of Americans who were intent on perpetrating an insurrection would not be waving American flags. They would hate the American flag. To them, it would stand for a form of government they wished to see toppled and replaced. Nor would insurrectionists be chanting slogans in defense of the Constitution. They would want to trash the Constitution. Because, again, it stands for a form of government that they wish to see eradicated from the face of the earth. It would never occur to the members of the fake January 6th committee that the bulk of the people at the Capitol that day, and I am not talking about the idiot hoodlums who actually broke things and hurt people, were not insurrectionists. They were not coup plotters. Rather, they were righteously aggrieved citizens who believe fervently in our country and in its system of government, but who see the ruling class rigging the game right in front of them. And what, they're supposed to just not say anything about it? Yeah, best of luck with that one, fellas. And we will leave it there for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow and an edifying weekend. I will see you Monday. Until then, do not comply. Get off my lawn.